Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Chris with Inside the U. Thanks for stopping by. With the Miami Hurricanes needing a new head basketball coach for next season, I've been watching a lot of college basketball and trying to figure out who would possibly be a good fit at Miami. So in this video, I'm going to take a look at 3 head coaches who impressed me coming into the season and who also have impressed this season with their respective conferences. And I had a chance to watch each of these teams play their last game this week. So I'll offer a little bit of my thoughts on these 3 teams. Also, at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about head coaches that I've seen fans mention. What about this guy? I think this would be a good fit. So I'm going to address those names as well. But these 3 head coaches, again, these 3 could be bigger names as the season goes on, especially if they make the NCAA tournament, which all 3 could, as they, I think, could win their conferences. So it starts with Will Wade at McNeese in the Southland Conference. Then I'll talk about Bucky McMillan at Samford in the Southern Conference. And then finally, take a look at Lennie Acuff over at Lipscomb in the Atlantic Sun. So all 3 of these coaches have done really well, won a bunch of games. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, previous articles or podcasts, whatever it might be, I think winning games at the head coaching level is certainly going to be a prerequisite for a Miami head coach in the ACC, which I do want to mention Miami and then Virginia, who also has an interim head coach. Miami and Virginia might be the only 2 schools looking for a head coach after this season. I understand there's a little bit of grumblings with Virginia Tech and Mike Young, but for now, it really does look like when you look at the conference, it might just be the 2 openings. So with that being said, with Miami's success in recent years, although this year is not going well at all, and they've had a bad year last year and all that, it's still going to be one of those jobs where I think will be coveted because of the conference. And again, these jobs just don't open up very often. So let's get right into it. With Will Wade at McNeese, just a really highly impressive coach to me. I think he would certainly be a great option for the Hurricanes. I think it'd be a slam dunk hire. I think he would fit in well at Miami for a number of reasons. And the reason is because Will Wade has been successful wherever he has been. Only 42 years old. He's in his 4th head coaching stint and his 11th year as a head coach. In his previous 10 years, he has finished 1st or 2nd in the conference 7 times, which is highly impressive. He's done it at every step of the way. And he's doing it again this year in year 11. It looks like he's going to either win the conference or certainly finish 2nd. Definitely could stretch that 8 of 11. So that right there stands out to me as a really impressive coach with what he's been able to do. And looking back at LSU, before you got to McNeese, this is his 2nd season at McNeese, having a great season so far, and they've played well. And I think they're going to have a big year in the conference as they continue to get into it. But looking back at LSU, 5 years at LSU, made the NCAA tournament 3 times, would have been the 4th, projected to do so, but it was the COVID year. And it ended with those recruiting allegations and penalties, the violations that he had there. So it is interesting to look back on that, considering how things are now with NIL, and if a school like Miami will give him another opportunity at a big conference. And to me, I understand that the athletic director and athletic department have to do their due diligence to determine if he's going to be the right fit or if there's going to be potential issues moving forward. But I would say, from what I know, I think he would certainly be a good fit at Miami and the ACC at the next level. And I really like what he did at LSU. Won a bunch of games, had his team competing for SEC titles. Also, he pumped out a lot of highly impressive players. He got a lot of impressive recruits in, and then a lot of those guys ended up playing in the NBA, and some of them still are. You know, there's 2 biggest names that he coached at LSU currently in the NBA, Cam Thomas and Naz Reid. So those guys are different players, and that stands out to me too. You know, he had good guards at LSU. He also had good big men as well. So I think he can recruit at a high level, which is needed in the ACC if Miami wants to compete for ACC titles, if they want to be in the discussion with the Duke and North Carolina year after year, and be in that upper echelon of the ACC, get back to regularly being in the NCAA tournament. And that's something that Jim Larrañaga wasn't able to do on a real consistent basis. Yes, he had the 2 great years recently, Elite 8, Final 4, won the conference in those 2 years. But 3 losing seasons before that, and then now it's going to be that 2nd losing season after that run. So they had 2 great years, and then those other years weren't very good at all. So just that more consistency, and I think you could get that with Will Wade based on what he did at LSU, and again, what he did at Chattanooga, at VCU, And once again, at McNeese, just winning a ton of games. Last year, McNeese won 30 games and went to the NCAA tournament. So a highly impressive team, highly impressive resume so far for Will Wade. And I think he's going to be a hot name because I think, again, he's going to have another big season as he's already showing right now. They're really building momentum there at McNeese. So with the game that I watched the game at Houston Christian. They come away with a 16-point win, improved to 6-0 on the conference, playing on the road. And look, all three of these coaches coincidentally played on the road. And I think that's really impressive to win on the road. And I think with what I saw with McNeese, a couple things stand out to me. First off, with Houston Christian, their top player, Julian Mackey, comes into the game, averaging 15 points a game, a guard, but he was held to 9 points, 2 of 8 shooting. So, it's one thing watching these games. It's obviously much easier watching players and how players perform, but kind of watching a little bit of the coaching stuff, kind of taking a coaching angle. So you got to give this team and his coaching staff credit for essentially that scouting report and sticking to it, understanding he's a big deal, and they did a great job limiting his touches, making it hard for him to score. And I think that really hurt. I think that really hurt Houston Christian in the game. Other things that stood out to me too, and this was a lot of fun watching this, but McNeese was running all kinds of defensive looks. They would sometimes they'd go 3/4 court press and drop to maybe a half court press. They would definitely do a man-to-man defense, but also this was all in the same game. They would go with this half court trap, a 1-3-1. Sometimes they had this diamond press that they were also had out there too. So they were mixing all kinds of stuff. And again, when you're looking at it from a coaching's perspective, you like watching that kind of stuff. So definitely enjoyed watching that. And I thought they did a really good job as a team, forcing turnovers, making it really difficult on Houston Christian, and then doing well on offense. And with offense, I thought they shared the ball well. Just kind of watching them kind of play off each other. I thought they moved the ball well. There was an instance that stood out to me, a pick and roll situation, for example. And look, when you're doing a high pick and roll at the top, either 1-4, 1-5, whatever it might be, it's very easy for the other three guys to sit around and watch. And I think one of the big issues at Miami this season has been their ball movement and also the off the ball movement. And one thing I noticed in this pick and roll situation, the other guys were moving as well, because they weren't standing around watching. And to me, that's coaching, really, understanding, getting these players to understand you got to keep moving, even if you're not directly involved with the ball. So I thought that was good. So that stood out to me too. But again, just being able to show a lot of defensive looks. I thought that was really impressive, and doing all that in a game like this, I thought that, again, it just really stood out to me. And I think that's something that can translate to a higher level in the ACC. I think if you want to do different things based on scouting report, whatever it might be, I think it will translate, and you definitely like that Will Wade has that in his bag there. And there's a lot of impressive statistics for McNeese this season, just looking at how they've done in conference. And this is why I think they have a great shot at winning the conference. They're first right now in offensive efficiency in league games, and first defensively as well. Ranked first in a lot of key categories as well. Effective field goal percent, offense and defense, turnover percent. They're second offensively, but first defensively, offensive rebound first. 3-point shooting, they're first. 3-point defense, they're second. So again, up and down on both sides there, on both ends of the court, they're doing well, and they're impressive, and that stands out to me. And anytime, I'm going to keep doing this with coaches that I focus on because of the transfer portal. Take a look at a couple guys here, a couple guys to kind of keep in mind. If you want to watch McNeese play this weekend or coming up, or if you happen to want to watch more college basketball, you don't know what to watch. When you're watching McNeese, there's two guys that stand out to me in terms of some transfer portal possibilities. And it starts with Sincere Parker. And he's an interesting situation because he's listed as a junior. He's played, this is actually his 4th year, but because of the ruling, with it being the junior college ruling, I think he's got another year of eligibility still available if he wants to use it. So that is something I want to mention. But he had 2 years at St. Louis, and then this year at McNeese, and then also the JUCO year as well. But he was the leading scorer at St. Louis last year. He had some high major opportunities, and then he chose to go to McNeese. And he's an explosive guard. There was a play in the game, for example, where he got the ball underneath the basket, and essentially a drop step and doing a dunk. And that's something you typically see from big men, from the front court players. But for a guard to be able to do that kind of shows explosion and just a high level score. I think his scoring could translate to the ACC. And I think that he's someone to watch for. Again, if if Wade were to be the coach at Miami, then maybe that is an option. And then the other guy, a guy that Miami fans should be familiar with, and that's Quadir Copeland, who played 2 years at Syracuse and he's first year at McNeese. So he definitely has a year of eligibility still remaining. And I think with Copeland is, he's a bigger guard and he's being used on the point guard spot a lot more, so just kind of watching him operate as a bigger guard, and I think with that point guard spot, with what Will Wade has had to say in some interviews, it's a very important position, and he understands that, and he likes what Copeland's able to do, kind of distribute, and also kind of just having that big size there at the point guard spot. And then lastly, just kind of wrapping this up with Will Wade, one of his key assistants, because again, you're expecting, anytime there's a coaching change, the potential could be that his assistant coaches could follow him. And one guy stood out to me in particular, Vernon Hamilton, former Clemson standout guard. So he certainly understands the conference. He was a graduate assistant there, also defensively. And I think this is going to be a theme with the next head coach. Hamilton was kind of a defensive guy, all defensive team performer, Clemson's school leader in steals. So he's bringing that defensive mentality. Again, understands what it takes in the ACC. So that's going to wrap it up with Will Wade. Drop in the comments below. I'm going to keep this thing going, but let me know what you think about Will Wade. Do you think it'd be a good fit at Miami, or would you like to see somebody else? And the next guy I'm going to focus on is Samford's Bucky McMillan, 41 years old. Really interesting journey to being a head college coach. And he's in his 5th year at Samford. Before that, he was a high school basketball state champion coach. Did a great job. And this is a guy that's been in the Birmingham area his whole life, from a high school coach and now at Samford. So that is, and also where he went to college. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. He does have this ties to the South, but it is a little bit of a question mark. Is he going to leave Alabama, leave the state? Would he come to Miami if it was an opportunity to do so? Last year, Samford was one of those big time stories in college basketball as they went 29-6. It was their 3rd straight 20-win season under McMillan. And it looks like they're going to get 20 wins once again, as they're 15-3 right now and having a great season, playing really well. Last year made the NCAA tournament. And if you've been following college basketball, you'll hear this term with McMillan, and that's Bucky ball. So what does that mean? It's a really high-paced, really high-tempo team that likes to press a lot. They play a lot of guys. They actually tell their players, they really kind of have this motto of possessions over minutes philosophy, in terms of basically your minutes might not be there, but because we play so fast, the possessions will be there. So that's kind of how they kind of get guys to buy in terms of building that depth. And a lot of guys do play a lot of minutes. And they also have this frantic full court press. They create a lot of steals. Right now, they're 4th in the country in steals. They're 7th in scoring. And they're also 4th in three-point shooting, 3-point field goals made in games. So they shoot a lot of threes, create a lot of havoc defensively with their full court pressure. And they create a lot of steals and have this exciting brand of basketball to watch. And that's definitely stood out to me in the game against Mercer on the road. Even though it was a little dicey in the end, they held on for a 75-74 win. They managed to win 75-74 in this crazy ending to a game. You hardly see anything like this, but Samford was in control of the game in the second half. But then they didn't score a field goal in the final 8 minutes as Mercer kept kind of grinding its way back into the game. It ends up being a tie game, 27 seconds left. Samford ball calls timeout, sets up a play, and then at 10 seconds, I'm watching McMillan. He's yelling at the point guard to go. And the point guard slips and falls. It's a turnover there outside the arc, and they actually had another player on Samford's team chase down block. So they block it out of bounds, inbounds underneath the own basket there for Mercer. 1.8 seconds left. And Samford was doing such a great job defensively that the Mercer player tried to inbounds it off a Samford player's back, created a turnover, and then the player who threw it in actually fouled the guy. So they go down to the other end of the floor and under a second left, and a guy splits his free throws, and Samford does walk away with the win. So they proved a 5-0 in the conference. Just kind of a wild ending there. But again, when I talk about Buckyball and McMillan's style of play, it was on full display against Mercer. They would go with this full court press. Sometimes they would drop back and it looked like a three-quarter court press, which they would do at times. And look, there was a time where one of their big guys was guarding the ball in the back court, expecting him to defend the ball handler there as one of their big players, as Mercer's big guys were bringing up the ball. And that just kind of shows you the trust, and it's not just about the guards. Everybody has to do these things that they believe in. And the big guys have to shoot threes, for example, as well, which I'll get into a little bit here. But I thought they were doing a good job with the pressure, and they were bringing this full court pressure. Typically most coaches will only do the press after a make, either a made shot or made free throw, because you can set it up. But they would do this pressure a little bit off of misses as well. That's just kind of their philosophy, that they would do that. And I found that to be interesting. But again, they would go to a man. Sometimes it might have looked like they would drop to a zone, but pretty much they ran to a man-to-man defense. But from what I was watching, but there was this 1-3-1 that they had as well, and that I found that to be interesting because they would actually put one of their smaller guards in that middle spot in the three. And sometimes you don't do that. You might hide a guard, maybe put him on the wing, but they put essentially one of their smallest players on the floor right there in the middle. So just different philosophy, but it was fun to watch McMillan. Not just with the press, but that was interesting to watch, but also kind of drop back and do some different things in the half court as well. And just looking at three guys at Samford who could be potential transfer portal possibilities with all of this. It starts with their leading scorer, and with Trey Fort. And I think he's another interesting one. He's listed as a senior, but again, with this ruling regarding junior college players, which basically means if your eligibility, my understanding, if your eligibility is to run out this year, and you did have junior college, if you did go to junior college, then you will be granted an extra year of eligibility. So Trey Fort would fit into that if he wanted to go for a sixth year. He spent 2 years at JUCO, 3 years at three different Division I schools, including Mississippi State last year, before arriving at Samford this year. So he's one to watch, I think. I like him. He's a guard that can play on the ball, off the ball, scores the ball, has good athleticism as well, and that was on display. I like that he was able to kind of get his own shots. And then Jaden Brownell. He was an interesting player. I liked watching him on both ends of the floor. Kind of a pick and pop four-man. He could hit threes. He would score down low. And just kind of watching him, and this is without obviously talking to McMillan, but it looked like Jaden is a key part of what they want to do defensively. He's a guy that kind of like an anchor in the zone, and he's expected to do a lot of different things with whatever they're doing. He's a key guy. He's got to be able to defend the paint with the guy he's guarding, but either also with help side defense and just kind of being in the right spot with these other looks that they want to go with. And Brownell was the guy that I was saying he guarded the ball handler earlier in the video that I mentioned. But I thought Jaden was a good guy. Watching him hit threes, he's hitting them at a high rate, kind of this pick and pop guy that they would use on pick and roll situations. And he just seemed to be a key guy. And that's the thing when you're looking at potential transfers. It's not necessarily, are they going to be one of 5 starters at Miami, this kind of thing. Miami's going to have, essentially, it looks like they're going to have to completely have a roster overhaul. But with guys leaving, they have a lot of spots available. And I think guys like Jaden and even Trey or whoever the guy is going to be the next head coach, you want to bring guys I would think, that understand your philosophies and what you're trying to do. And then the third guy kind of fits that mold a little bit, not big numbers. Josh Holloway, a sophomore, can play that point guard role. They have a point guard right now, a main guy, but when he goes out, Josh is kind of the guy that kind of give him the ball. And a guy out of Memphis, good athleticism, kind of a solid guy, but understands the system, And look, if you want to think about another guy, I think you should definitely keep in mind, and that's current Miami guard A.J. Staten-McCray. Played at Samford last year. Completely understands McMillan's system. He's a redshirt junior, so he does have a year of eligibility remaining. So if McMillan were to come over, would Staten-McCray go ahead and stay at Miami? Just something to pay attention to. And AJ certainly was part of that big successful season that they had a year ago, winning 29 games, getting into the NCAA tournament. But again, it was definitely fun watching Bucky's team play and seeing how everything kind of played out there in the game against Mercer. And then finally, the last coach to focus on is Lennie Acuff over at Lipscomb in the Atlantic Sun Conference, a conference that's very familiar to the Miami program. And Lennie's in year 6 at Lipscomb and looking to take the Bisons back to the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2018, second time in school history. And before he got to Lipscomb, He was at 22 years at Alabama Huntsville, a Division II program. He won there, won a bunch of games, went to the tournament a bunch of times. Also before there, he was at the NAIA level. So a really veteran coach, 59 years old. So he's older than the other two guys that I mentioned in this video. But really just watching him, he just strikes me as a guy that's just a complete basketball guy that's going to be successful wherever he's at, just understands how to coach. There was something that stood out to me and kind of learning more about him. And he said he's had some, good teams, not so good teams, whatever it might be, but he's never had a good team with bad guards. And to me, that shows the philosophy. He really understands that you've got to have good guards to be on, at least have a chance to have a good team. And I think with the team he has now, watching them, they've got an all-around team. They can score with their guards. I like their veterans at the guards that they have out there on the floor, but they can score with their big guys as well. They can kind of stretch and kind of feed the post. They can score down low. They have good size for the level that they're at. So it's just this really all-around team that, it's not a team that plays at a frantic pace like the other schools that I've mentioned, but, so their tempo is not real high, but offensively, defensively, they're just a really good team. Offensively right now, they're first in efficiency in league play, second defensively. And right now, they're tied for second in the conference, but they're projected to have the best record, according to KenPom, and win that conference. So definitely paying attention to them. And in this game against Bellarmine, they were down 36-32 on the road. Bellarmine didn't have their best players, not having a good season at all. And Lipscomb's only winning by 4 points at halftime. And at this point, I was really fascinated to see how they were going to play in the second half. And I was highly impressed. Lipscomb came out of the second half. I don't know what Coach Acuff had to say to them at halftime or what adjustments were really made, but Lipscomb outscored Bellarmine 25-0 out of the gate in the second half and blew the game wide open. And it was highly impressive. And to do that on the road, it's not like you've got the crowd backing you or anything like that. And it was everything. Creating turnovers, making key plays on offense, getting the stops, making things difficult for Bellarmine. And it was just really impressive how they played in the game. And just a really solid, it felt like they were staying true to their identity. They know what kind of team they have. Feels like they're going to win a bunch of games like they've been doing, like Acuff has done in years past, ever since wherever he's been, just wins a lot of games, that type of a coach. And just looking at potential portal possibility, there was one guy that stood out to me at Lipscomb, although I didn't get a chance to see him play. It was his first game out, but he's going to miss the rest of the season. Coach mentioned that with a foot injury. So Dylan Faulkner, he was a former All-State player out of Georgia. He's a second-year player right now at Lipscomb. And he was also a state high jump champion. So he's got that athleticism. Just watching a little bit of his highlights. Certainly looks like a good player. And Acuff certainly said good things about him. He actually said he felt like he's the best five-man in the conference. So definitely keep your eye on Faulkner. If Acuff were to come to Miami, would Faulkner be over the foot injury and that kind of a thing? So definitely just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's get into some of these other big names I keep hearing and just want to kind of address all of these guys. And to me, they're all no's at Miami for different reasons. Just my own personal thoughts. Starting with Rick Pitino. At one point, yes, it might have been a good idea, but he's 72 years old now. He's the head coach at St. John's. They are winning some. But he just made this comment, in addition to being older and that kind of a thing. Earlier, he mentioned, I'm not quitting like some coaches. He didn't directly mention who he was talking about, but at that point, Larrañaga had already stepped down. And although Larrañaga is not currently part of the basketball program, I can't imagine that going over well from internal with things at Miami. So I don't think he's a possibility. Some people have mentioned, what about his son, Richard Pitino? New Mexico, on the rise the last few years since he's been there. And that is a good sign for him and his career. But it didn't work out at Minnesota, and he had plenty of time to get wins and kind of get that program going, and he didn't get that thing going, which is why he's at New Mexico. So for those reasons, I don't think it'd be a good fit. I don't like when coaches haven't had the success at a high-level conference, and they're at another conference. So I think that there's better options, and a guy like Pitino, to me, isn't a good option for Miami. These next two guys are very similar situations. Sean Miller at Xavier. Anthony Grant at Dayton. Both of those guys are at their alma maters, and they didn't work out at previous schools. Miller went to Arizona, it didn't work out. He was a head coach at Xavier before. Now he's back at Xavier. I just don't see him moving on past them there. And then with Anthony Grant, he is from Miami, but he didn't work out at Alabama, and now he's coaching Dayton where he went to school and things like that. So I just think that that's not going to be an option as well. Also, I'm hearing he's got plenty of resources at Dayton. It's a really strong fan base. So they're in the Atlantic 10. He has a great resource with the NIL opportunities in relation to the rest of the conference. So I just think he's in a good situation there. I don't see it as being an option at Miami. And then finally, the other two names I definitely want to mention, Shaka Smart at Marquette, head coach right now. He was at Texas, one of those hot names in college basketball. And some people, what about Miami, the ACC? But I think Shaka's in a really good situation at Marquette. It's a basketball school. They're winning a bunch of games. I think him being at Texas, which was a football school, it's a little bit different. It's a lot different for coaches, for head basketball coaches. And I just don't think coming to Miami would be a good fit for those reasons. And just going all the way back to Will Wade, I didn't mention it before, but because he was at LSU, a football school, he would understand what it takes, and what to expect at a school like Miami, where basketball is not the biggest sport on campus. And then finally, Juwan Howard. Look, I understand the fascination for Juwan Howard, currently an assistant coach right now for the Brooklyn Nets, got himself back into coaching with Michigan, his alma mater. But similar to what I said earlier about Richard Pitino, when it doesn't work out, and same way with Sean Miller and even Anthony Grant, it did not work out at all for Juwan Howard at Michigan. They declined. They had a good season, but then every year after that really declined. And then he was let go at 8-24 season. So it just didn't go well for him there. And I just don't think that would be a good fit at Miami. So for all of those coaches, I know they're big names, but to me, I don't think Miami needs to go into any of those coaches and look at any of those guys. There's a lot of other good options. I've touched on 3 of them in this video. But keep watching college basketball. Pay attention to the guys who are winning their conference, regardless of what level they're at, and see if it could be a good fit at Miami. I also think geography is a big thing to watch for in coaching searches. You want to find a coach that at least has some sort of ties. It doesn't have to be to the ACC directly, but at least some sort of sense on, being one of those Southeastern Conference schools, or even in the Northeast, because of Miami and its fan base and also the recruiting areas they typically get players from. I think that's important as well. So I think you kind of take a look at those, from the Southeastern portion of the United States and into the Northeast. I think that pay attention to those and who's winning, but certainly you can grab a coach from anywhere, but pay attention to the coaches who are winning, not just this season, but who've continually stacked up success. I think those are the names to definitely pay attention to. But drop in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the 3 guys who I mentioned: Will Wade, Bucky McMillan, and also Lennie Acuff. Do you like any of those 3? Are there other names that you'd like me to focus on primarily, go more in depth with, or names I haven't even mentioned that you think that would be a good fit at Miami? Definitely drop in the comments below. Love hearing what you guys have to say. Thanks for your support. Thanks for watching this video. Hopefully you like this. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Have a good rest of the weekend. Enjoy the college basketball season. There's a lot to watch, especially right now as Miami looks for its next head basketball coach. Thanks for your support. Take care.